Hey guys, welcome back to another episode of the Real Hacker Hours podcast. This is basically where I just do my normal side project work. I just hit the record button before I do it and explain everything that I'm doing as I'm doing it. Today we're going to be looking at the mod fast CGI Apache module. Now what this does is it facilitates basically part of the protocol for if a binary wants to talk to the web server. It provides means to do that. And yeah, we're going to be reversing out this module and see if there's anything fun. So, what I've done already is I've compiled modfast CGI and I've configured Apache so that it loads it. But yeah, let's just begin looking at it. I actually have already done a little bit of research. Let me just pull it up. Where is it? Here we go. Modules, fast CGI. Okay. And let's pull up the actual source for it. Since we compile, well, since it's open source, we have the source for it. So let's take a look at it. modfastcgi.sql. So module declaration is right here. It specifies that we want to add hooks, specifies that these are the configuration options, and only has per directory configuration, no merging of directories, and no per server configuration functionality at all. For the hooks, has 7 hooks. Now, one thing about I'm just going to quickly review some of them. This is some of the work I've already done last night on this. Init module, when you look at this function, actually, you see something pretty interesting. Is that it will, where is it? Okay, yeah, right here. It will actually fork another process and start it. It has something called the process manager. I'm not quite sure as to exactly what it will do with that. I just know that it forks a separate process, probably has some inter-process communication, which will be some interesting functionality to look at. What other hooks are there? There's Fcgi child init, which I believe it's sort of like an init module. Yeah, it creates some events. Not quite sure what those are exactly. Is there a man page for it? No, there's not. Creates a mutex for, or I'm assuming for some of the shared object or shared data things, and then it actually spawns a process manager thread. So there appears to be an overarching process manager, and then each child appears to have its own process managing thread. Also, by the way, I forgot to mention where are the hooks? Hooks are here. Init module is called upon when HTTP or Apache is actually started and before it actually starts spawning up worker processes. We can tell this from the fact that it's an AP hook post config. On top of that, when I was reversing this, actually set a breakpoint for it and actually confirmed that it is hit when we start up. This Fcgi child init, that is, I believe, judging from the AP hook child init, it's ran when a new worker process is spawned. Now, content handler, I believe this is where it actually takes in data and processes it. Yeah, process fast CGI script requests. Cool, so let's take a quick look through here. Okay, it creates a new fast CGI request using the request FR. Okay, it looks like Fcgi request is in its own struct that it gets passed in the address of, which it populates in there, takes in the request, and this ret is just, oh hey, is it successful or not? Let's go ahead. Actually, I will need to find out what the Fcgi request struct is. Just make a note of that. Cool. Let's also add a note to look at this. Cool. If it's dynamic invocation, make sure scripts are okay here. I don't know what dynamic invocation is. Let's keep on looking. Okay. So at the end of the day, looking at this, we can tell that it's an if-then condition, and looking at the inside, it's obviously says like, hey, there's an error and returns HTTP forbidden, so this is just an error check effectively. Process the Fcgistruct request, do work. Okay, so this do work function, I'm guessing that's probably where the majority of the actual like processing of CGI scripts happens. And special case redirects. Okay. Cool. So what do we want to look at for here? We want to first look at this create Fcgi request to just see how like it populates the structure. Actually, first thing we want to look at structure of an Fcgi request, then create Fcgi request function, then look at the do work since that's probably where the meat of what we want to find out is, and then maybe just quickly look at that. So how we're gonna find the Fcgi request. I'm going to do the same thing that I've been doing, is just gripping through the source code, since that seems to work. Also, if anyone wants, this is the setup that I just documented for Modfast CGI. I'm just going to scroll through it. If you want to actually see it, just pause the video. Okay, cool. Grip tech IR Fcgi request. Is this, let's take a look. What files are actually imported in here? Fcgi.h. Probably in there. If I had to guess, Fcgi.h right here. Cool. Fcgi request. Fcgistruct. Okay, so this is the actual Fcgistruct itself. Keeps track of the socket. So the connection to the Fcgi server stored as an integer. True if reading content bytes. Type of packet. Length of data bytes. Recording padding after content. So it looks like this is just metadata about the packet. Fcgi server info looks like it's another struct that stores information about the Fcgi server. It's not server itself. Server path, input buffer, output client. Okay, cool. So you have a base rough idea of what the Fcgi request struct looks like. I'm going to save this for later. I'm going to kind of just document it as markdown since that's what I'm used to. Since I just write a ton of it all the time. Okay, cool. So, looking through this again, what do we have? What's next? There was the create Fcgi request. Is that in here? Yes, this function is in here. And it is kind of big. Let's just copy this over into another directory, not directory file. Cool, so let's take a look. What do we have here? Takes the request, the Fcgi request, and a path, which if I recall correctly, from the context that yeah, it's always going to be null. But not in check user authentication or yeah. From just content handler, it looks like it's always going to be null. It probably has something to do with authentication, judging from the fact that when it's called from the context of like a check access or check auth, that's when it's actually specified. So let's just see here, fs path equals fs path equals path. So it's either the fs path is either equal to our file name if path is null, or if path isn't null, it's equal to path. I believe that's what this is saying. Get request identity. Okay, UID, GID. What is this get request identity? Okay, let's see. What is get? Is it declared in here? Get request identity, cool. Request identity equals AP. Okay, I'm not going to go any further, but just looks at the request and somehow determine identity. Somehow just determines, well, actually, it looks like it's just grabbing the UID and the GID of the server. So the user ID and the group ID of the server. Cool. Okay, let's continue looking through this. FCGI, etel, fsget by ID. Okay, it looks like it's just getting the FCGI. Utility, I'm not quite sure what that is though. Oh, it's getting the FCGI server, which is what it looks like. Okay, cool. That being said, if fs is equal to no, which fs, oh, that's not the path. So if it can't get the server, it looks like it just tries to get it a different way. So here, string compare fs path. Okay, it looks like here it's just effectively filling in metadata about the request. So if you want to know like where, I mean not the request, the what is the struct? I forget. The FCGI request, yeah. Just filling in the data about that. You see that some of them are hard coded like this. This is always going to be it. However, this is going to be a bit different. And yeah, cool. Let's continue looking through it. If that does not equal to 0, what is NPH? Does it say NPH no comment? Okay, I don't know what that is. So looking at this comment, it says invalid request non-parsed header support is not available. Non-parsed header NPH, I think this is effectively just a value to say, are there non-parsed headers? What a header is, I'm not sure. So, okay, cool. You have a rough idea of how it generates the request now, which is good. Now, let's take a look at... Let's continue down. Well, the next thing that I wanted to look at, so we have... What was it? Create FCGI request. Okay, so we have this do work. That is the next function I want to look at. This is the core routine for moving data between the FastCGI application and the web server's client. Cool. Core routine, just like I expected. And let's copy this. Okay, so it takes the request, the request that it was generated, and the FCGI request. Cool. FCGI protocol queue begin request. What is this function? What does it do? It's not only called in here, it's defined somewhere else. Let's see where that is. FCGI protocol.c. This is going to be very interesting. Okay. Building queue, fast CGI message handler. Build in queue a fast CGI bin request message. So build begin request queue header FCGI buff add block. So it looks like they have abstracted away some of the functionality of like adding of like sending messages to several other functions. We'll probably want to take a look at those later, but for now let's just keep it kind of abstract so we get a good idea of what everything's doing. If equals to FCGI responder. So if for some reason this fast CGI request is a responder, it will run this code. Be set up. Okay, cool. Block alarms. We're just to clean up unblock alarms. If using pipe. Okay, it looks like it's setting it that it's gonna either use a pipe or a socket, which those are just different ways that you can like communicate with between different processes. COM with the server is done. Close connection to fast CGI. Okay, so this is probably where the actual in pipe.io. Where is this? Which function does this get executed in? Well, okay, it's actually declared in modfast CGI. Cool. Let's take a look. Okay, let's look through here. Declares a bunch of vars. Create event, queue environment, read from queue, open connection, right. Okay, so it looks like it's using our actual right font. Wait, is this in a switch statement? Oh, this isn't a switch statement, so the different states. State environment send, fall through, fall through, fall through. Fall through, write to client, break. Okay, it looks like there's a lot of different ways that a client can talk to this module, and as such there is defined in the code a bunch of different ways. Not going to reverse it out too heavily right now because I still want to understand. Yeah, what I'm trying to do is right now get like effectively like a map of like, oh hey, this is the main components of the code base, this is what they do, this is where they are, and this is how they interact with the other pieces in order to achieve the overall functionality that's wanting to happen. Build request. No, what am I looking at again? I've lost focus. I'm looking at do work. So in pipe.io socket.io, that's probably where the input and output actually happens. Closes the connection. If it equals FCGI respond, I don't know what that is, but extra functionality right there for that. DQ. find. Looks like so a bit more I/O here is happening. Not quite sure with what Russian Apache requires our flesh over beef. Okay. Didn't know Russian Apache is a bit different, but okay. Also, there's a switch statement here for the fast CGI parse header. Depending on different headers, we see different things. Okay, cool. And lastly, there is, where's the do work? Content handler, there is the post process for redirects. Let's see, is this in here? Yes, it is. Script wants to produce its own redirect body. It now has to explicitly say status 02 if it was to. Okay, cool. There are differences between handling and mod CGI files. Okay, yeah, it looks the internal redirect handler, our headers out location, our headers in. Okay, it looks like this is just the code where what the comments basically say here. If the CGI request wants to handle a redirect, that's where it does. Okay, cool. I'm gonna pause this for a second. Okay, cool. So we have a rough idea of what this content handler function does and the various parts. Creates a request, handles the IO for the request, and then handles redirects if the request requires any. Now let's take a look at the other hooks to get a rough idea of what they do. There's check user authentication, check access, check user authorization. Let's start with user authentication. So okay, kind of a bit longer than the previous one. Oh, it actually gets the Apache module configuration for this directory. That's cool. Get the user password. Okay, cool. Gets the password specified by the request. Okay, create Fcgistruct request. That looks similar from the previous one. Save the existing subprocess environment because we're gonna muddy up. Okay, that's interesting. Set in remote password. Okay, so it's setting things from the current environment, the remote password, and the Fcgi Apache role. So there's a password and a Apache role as part of the environment that this runs in. Fcgi protocol doesn't differentiate authentication. Role equals authorizer. Do we need compatibility? Okay. And then it actually does the work. Then post process auth. This is an error check, error check, error check, more error checks, basic auth failure. Let's look at this post process auth. If our past AP table do. Okay, looks like, is this a function? It says function, so it's just doing an indirect call on a function. Comparing key variable. Okay, so this is just calling, indirectly calling some functions based upon what if it passes or fails in the type of request. So objectively looking at the check user authentication function, this to me seems like the content handler function hook effectively. There's just a few extra functionalities tied to it for authentication. And I get the feeling that the other hooks for authentication are going to be somewhat similar. Let's look at check access. Gets the module, creates the request, saves the environment variables, but where does it actually set it? Okay, it's saved in there. It's probably set back in one of the callback functions. Cool. Do work. Post process off. Okay, looks pretty similar to. There's probably some differences, but at like a super high level, the functionality looks similar to that of the previous auth function. Check user authorization. Get the module, create the request, saves the environment, does the work after setting the variables about the environment to set the environment variable so that it is unauthorized or whatever that means. A redirection B error checks, post process auth, and yeah, cool. So these four functions right here, they all deal with actually processing CGI requests for, except these three deal with specifically requests that deal with authentication. And you can see here that the hooks check user ID, access checker, auth checker, that their hooks are for particular auth related things. And lastly, let's take a look at this fix up hook. Okay, cool. If it's a file name, then it will get request identity. What is it? Details get ID. R handler equals fast CGI handler. Looks like this fast CGI handler name. This is a constant content handler. Looks like this is just to me if it gets a file name for something that CGI needs to handle, it will just set the handler to the CGI handler, because we see here effectively what it's doing is oh hey, it's a file name, cool, can we get, it will get the UID and the GID associated with the request. It will get, I think, a Fcgi's server. Actually, let's see what this function actually does. Pretty sure we actually looked at this before. Okay, is it defined in this code file? Let's see where it is defined. Fcgi util.c. Let's take a look in there. Fcgi util.c. Find a fast CGI server. So it is actually returning the ID integer for a fast CGI server associated with that UID and group ID. So yeah, effectively, it's checking, is a request for does a request have a file name? Cool. Is there an Fcgi server associated with this UID and GID? There is. Okay, cool. Set the handler to this fast CGI handler, which if you take a look at what this appears to be, you will see that content handler, which is the handler for the majority of well, basically all of the non-authentication based fast CGI. Yeah, script requests. So we have a pretty good idea. Let's also take a look. We have a pretty good idea of what the various hooks are. Initializes the process manager for a process. Well, actually, like fork a separate process that handles it. Still, I don't have a lot of like knowledge as to like how the process manager, how it works under the hood, which I will probably want to look at that. This will effectively initialize a new child process to handle fast CGI request, and will also spawn another process manager thread within that process to do it. This will handle effectively fast requests to fast CGI. Basically all of them except for authentication based ones, which are going to be handled by these. And this appears to be like some sort of like handler redirection to make fast CGI handle it. Cool, so we have a good idea of what those are. Granted, we will we will need to spend a bit more time looking into exactly like how those function. And let's take a quick look at these. So we see app class, fast CGI server, external app class, fast CGI, external server. These are just the options that you can use to configure. I'm just quickly going through seeing what they are. Ipcdir, fast CGI, SU exec, CGI wrapper, config, fast CGI authenticator, fast CGI. So this is authentication. Interesting. Authenticator authorizer. Check user authorization. It might just be me, but I'm noticing like we see we're seeing like 3 separate like auth based things. Each of them has fast CGI authenticator, followed by authoritative. Looks like they're just 3 different types of auth that are here, and also notice that there are 3 different types of auth-based hooks. Probably not a coincidence. But yeah, this is a good first step to looking at here. This has been going on for 30 minutes, so I'm going to cut it off here. Thank you for watching.